Finders, keepers, losers, weepers. The wise words of Neil Buchanan, and never have they been more apt than in David Jones' classic Frustrate 'em Up, Finders Keepers. Now before we begin, my history with David Jones and his Magic Night games was always a strange one. I absolutely adored Spellbound, Nighttime, Stormbringer, and the game we're currently looking at today. What really drew me into these games were the sheer ingenuity of the game, the personality that shone through, and those lovely chunky graphics. That all being said, I don't think I ever got through more than like 3 screens of any of the later games. I was a dumb kid, and the Magic Night games seemed like a gift from heaven that was just slightly out of reach. Finders Keepers was the standout title though. It didn't follow the same mechanisms as its later games. It was the only one I could actually get very far with. That is to say, I still didn't get very far, but I could at least work out how to move from screen to screen. Where the later titles in the series took the Magic Night games into an almost puzzle RPG style, Finders Keepers played out in relatively familiar territory. For those who already had a few Spectrum games under their belt, they could easily jump in and play it. Finders Keepers was just a little different. In terms of the story, things immediately began fairly off-kilter. Tomorrow is the princess's birthday, and it's your job to find her a present. You're immediately transported to the castle of Spriteland, and it's here that you'll spend your time exploring and collecting random shit, and then selling it to ghosts. Yes, ghosts. They need money. The interesting thing about all of this is that there are actually 2 ways to complete the game. You can either collect treasure to please the king and join the knights of the polygon table, or you can just collect as much treasure as possible and bugger off. I think we all know what I'll be aiming for. Once you begin the game, things will immediately start to feel familiar. There's a Jet Set Willy vibe to how the initial phases of the game start off, and much of your time is going to be spent grappling with Magic Knight's incredibly precise jump. What you may fail to notice, however, is that each object you pick up has a value, and with repeated plays it becomes practically essential to know what each of these items are, how much they're worth, and whether or not they combine with each other. Picking up 2 items that are compatible will automatically turn them into a new, usually more valuable item. For example, the Philosopher's Stone and a chunk of lead will give you a nice bar of gold. I gave that as an example as that's the only one I've found, but there's probably at least like 1 more or something. You can only hold 5 items at a time, and I'm going to give you 1 tip straight away. Do not pick up the glue. If you pick up the glue, you can't drop it. If you're anything like me, you'll still keep picking up the glue because you'll constantly forget your own advice, but the warning's there. After a bit of exploration, you'll eventually come across the game's second mode of gameplay, the maze. This is one of the things that fascinated me so much back in my younger days, as this sort of monumental shift in gameplay rarely, if ever, happened with budget titles. The maze is a simple enough affair nowadays, but it felt like I'd stumbled across something unbelievably cool when I realised that the castle was this interwoven network of mazes and platform stages. Exploring this place was going to be an absolute blast. Or it would have been if I could ever have figured out how to get any further. This leads me to the biggest frustration with Finders Keepers, and actually, come to think of it, my only real frustration. The precision required to get from one platform to another is heinous. When I came back to this screen for the first time in 30 years, I could feel the sweat pouring out of me. Like a bad acid flashback, I immediately began to feel the spiders crawling under my skin as it dawned on me that I'd never actually got through the pathway on the right-hand side. Try as I might, I just couldn't figure out how to even get on the blue platform that led up to it. Thankfully, we now live in the future, so after watching a quick walkthrough on how to get up there, imagine my surprise when it was nothing more complicated than simply jumping up there. How hard can that be, right? so it's not easy. But as with all of these Spectrum games, especially those in the early half of the 80s, a touch of difficulty was often the main cure for a short game. It takes some time to really get that muscle memory in place, and you'll still make mistakes, but after playing Finders Keepers for any length of time, you'll start to see Magic Knight's trajectory in your mind's eye, and 6 times out of 10, you'll be able to make the correct leap. The saving grace here is that Magic Knight doesn't go all in on its difficulty. There are no one-hit deaths here, rather an energy bar that depletes and a set of lives to keep you going. This is especially essential as there are a number of times where you'll take a hit that you have absolutely zero chance of avoiding. So whether intentional or not, the energy bar really does go a fair way to alleviate some of the standard early 80s bullshit that you'll have come to expect. And here's the thing about Magic Knight. With time, skill, perseverance, and maybe a guide or something, I'm not friggin' Einstein, the game is winnable. You can actually get there. Magic Knight is difficult, but it's not one of those Spectrum games that you just have to resign to the shelf of shame because it keeps looking at you with disgust. It's not easy, don't let me falsely take you down that road, but it is doable. And that's practically a commendation on its own, but when coupled with just how inventive the game is, it's easy to see why Finders Keepers still stands tall as one of the Spectrum's biggest highlights. Much like the Philosopher's Stone and the Bar of Lead, David Jones took a platform game and his own bag of weird ideas, and he made something more valuable than the sum of its parts. Also, you can still lose a life on the end screen. It's got to be a first.